legally required hearing. Oh, is this online too? Okay, so, this is, just to repeat what I've been saying, this is part of our administration and city council's efforts to have more opportunities for community input into what we here at City Hall are doing. This is one of 2 town halls. The next one will be this coming Monday, also at 6 o'clock, right here at City Hall. So we encourage folks to come out to Monday's event as well. In past years, at least in recent past years, there has not been any opportunity afforded the public to provide input into CDBG programming other than the legally required public hearing that City Council has to conduct. So we're excited to offer some additional opportunities for public feedback into how to program community development block grant funds. Again, this is one of 2 opportunities specific to the programming of CDBG funds. We've had well over 20 town halls and listening sessions since City Council and I took office in January. And it's important to note that although CDBG funds are currently being administered by the county, we are planning and intending to bring that administration back in-house. We've created a new Department of Grants and Philanthropy in part so that we have the staffing capacity to administer those dollars ourselves. There are still 1 or 2 positions that are open in connection with the work of that department, and we're working very diligently to fill those positions so that we can then go to the Department of Housing and Urban Development at the federal level, where CDBG funds come from, and make the case that we should be given administrative control back over the city's CDBG funds. In the meantime, though, while the county is administering them, they do listen to what we as the city say we want when it comes to programming those dollars. And ultimately, City Council will be voting on how best to utilize those funds in our community. So without further ado, I'm going to pass it over to our professionals here at the city. We're joined, of course, by Rachel Loughran, our Community Development Director, and Alex Borngesser, our Director of the Department of Grants and Philanthropy. And they're going to get into all of the nuts and bolts about what CDBG funds are, what the history of them is, what the opportunities are ahead, and what the next steps are. But before I turn it over to them to really get into the meat and potatoes, I want to recognize 2 of my colleagues who are here, and I want to emphasize nothing that we do in the mayor's office here at City Hall is possible without our partners on City Council. And so it's really an honor to have 2 of our partners on City Council present for this CDBG forum. That's Pastor Councilman William Parker. So let's give him a round of applause. And then we're also joined by Councilwoman Melanie Rutherford. So let's give her a round of applause as well. I also just want to note that we're also joined by a couple of officials from the Pontiac Housing Commission as well. We're joined by Neil Hilton, who's the chair of the Pontiac Housing Commission Board, and we're also joined by Ahmad Taylor, who is the executive director of the Pontiac Housing Commission. And Melanie Rutherford, in fact, is doing double duty tonight because not only is she a city councilwoman, but she's also a member of the board for the Pontiac Housing Commission. So great to have all of them here as well.
Thanks so much for being here tonight. As the mayor mentioned, our objective is to gather community feedback for the use of programming, the program year 2023 Community Development Block Grant resources. Like the mayor mentioned, historically, the only opportunity for public comment and public feedback was during the hearing with council, and so we'd like to expand that to open up the conversation to our residents so we can build the most impactful programming of CDBG funding. So today, what we intend to do is go through a little CDBG 101 to talk about the history of block grant, what it means in Pontiac, look to the future for how we hope to program it in coming years, to talk about permissible uses, ineligible uses, and to speak with the community development director about some of her ideas regarding the use of CDBG, and then to kind of lay out a timeline for what this looks like for the city and when these dollars will be programmed, when the application will be submitted, and when we will ultimately receive these resources. With that, I will kick it over to my colleague Renee Hall, who can introduce a Community Development Block Grant.
Hello, everyone. So I just want to give a brief definition of what CDBG is. It's a Community Development Block Grant from HUD that provides funds annually to entitlement jurisdictions. CDBG funds housing, public facilities, public service activities that benefit low-income households and persons with special needs. Oakland County receives CDBG funds as an urban county.
Community Development Block Grant has an interesting history in the city of Pontiac. I think we're all familiar with Block Grant and HUD and the work that they do across the country, but specifically here, there once was a federal program department here at City Hall that managed all of the federal awards for the city. And during the time of emergency management, that department was dismissed and disassembled. They were no longer managing federal awards or grant-funded awards of any kind. And what happened was the city lost its ability to administer its own block grant. This can happen for a lot of different reasons. In the city's case, it was mismanagement, lack of reporting, and other administrative issues with with CDBG and reporting to HUD. This is problematic. There are federal regulations and guidelines that are strict, that are obligatory, that you cannot waiver on. And so at that time, the city lost its ability to manage its own resources, and that responsibility was then handed over to the county. Initially, that responsibility was going to be removed entirely, and the city was going to lose block grant. And several of our elected officials stepped in and said, listen, this is not appropriate, nor is it equitable. Let's find an alternative solution. And that was the solution that they came up with. It's been a great working relationship with the county. We work with them through a sub-grant agreement, which allows us to program and implement program through block grant, but they essentially act as the fiduciary. And so the city doesn't receive any of these funds. We don't disperse any of these funds. All of that administration happens at the county. But the programming and implementation happens here with city staff and our community. So looking to the future, as the mayor mentioned, we conducted a feasibility study to see if bringing CDBG back in-house was, 1, feasible, 2, reasonable, and 3, advantageous for the residents of the city of Pontiac. And we deemed that, in fact, it was, and I think that we can all come to that conclusion. A unique piece of block grant as part of a sub-grant agreement is that the county gets to take a portion of our award for administrative costs. And those administrative fees and costs pay for their staff to conduct the work that our city staff is quite capable of doing. And so I have the position and the stance that we should not be outsourcing our core competencies, and certainly not when it restricts resources that should be used for the public good. And so we have staffed a department here at City Hall, the Department of Grants and Philanthropy, to manage both public and private awards, federal, state, and local, as well as charitable contributions and foundation support. And we are prepared to bring CDBG back in-house to eliminate that administrative cost that goes to the county so we can program all of the resources for public services and public good. And this department will maintain compliance and handle reporting and the administration of this resource so that we're not outsourcing our core competencies and losing the ability to implement the most program and have the most impact. So that will likely happen in the following program year. We have initiated conversations with HUD to say we'd like to bring this back in-house. They gave us a little bit of a honey-do list, and we have completed most of it. There are 2 positions on our team that are currently open, and it is a requirement that we have all 5 positions filled. We're actively recruiting, and once the team is onboarded and has gone through orientation and is in a comfortable position to execute the work, we'll return to HUD and say, we've completed your list. And we'll have that conversation to bring it back in-house and begin to terminate that sub-grant agreement. So that was a lot of jargon, but looking to the future, the immediate future, we will program the 2023 CDBG dollars now, and we'll do that as part of our sub-grant agreement. And my colleague Mike is here, and he can talk to you about the national objectives, which will help you create a framework for how to think about how best to utilize CDBG resources and what really are the permissible uses of those dollars.
Hello. So the national objectives could be broken down really into three categories. The first being that they must primarily benefit low-income person or households. This is the most commonly used qualifier. Documentation of the benefit to low-income level persons is required of every project funded under this objective. The second being aid in the elimination of slum or blight conditions. HUD has strict guidelines to define conditions under slum and blight spot or area basis. A project must comply with the state definition of blight to meet this national objective. The third being it must meet a urgent community need. And generally, this objective is used in the case of recent serious natural disasters like an earthquake or flooding, and only when other funds are not available.
So I want to talk a little bit about types of projects that are ineligible, things we can't do. So as I'm sure you can all assume, federal awards come with lots of restrictions, lots of guidelines for what we can and can't do. And what you have up on the screen are a couple of examples of things that we absolutely cannot fund using Community Development Block Grant. So we cannot pay for the purchase of equipment, specifically construction equipment. So I know in the past we've talked about buying our own snowplows and buying our own street sweepers. That's not the type of thing we can do with block grant. We cannot pay directly for all of the new housing construction. We cannot pay for operating and maintenance expenses as it relates to capacity here at City Hall, and we can't provide income payments to residents. Meaning we can't cut the block grant award up and provide everyone with a check. Some permissible uses are acquisition and disposition, meaning clearance and demolition. And as you know, we've programmed demo programs in the past. We've demolished 17 batches of properties to this point that we deem to be unsafe or hazardous. You can participate in clearance and cleaning up of contaminated sites. You can invest in public facilities and improvements. So for example, a senior or youth child care center, a community center. You can participate in street improvements. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the sidewalk program. You can enhance public services, transportation services and senior services, youth programming, things of that nature. You can participate in code enforcement and rehabilitation of properties, and business startups and job creation, job training. These are only a few examples of the many, many things you can do with Community Development Block Grant. My reason for mentioning these ones are to get you thinking about how you might want to see CDBG programmed in a city of Pontiac, and so these are a few examples of ways you might do that. This is Rachel. She is the Community Development Director here at City Hall, and she's going to talk to you a little bit about ideas that the Community Development Department has for the use of CDBG.
Hello, I'm Rachel Cochran, Community Development Director. Under Community Development is building safety and code enforcement, planning, and economic development. Planning and economic development will be working hand in hand to take a look at our ordinances to see what the city can do to help promote new housing. The CDBG block grant dollars could be used to help revitalize existing housing. And our focus right now is neighborhood revitalization through housing, parks, and blight remediation. This could mean any number of things, as Alex has previously mentioned: We can use block grant dollars to update our parks, modernize the parks. We can use them for infrastructure in the parks. We can also use them to create a plan to revitalize specific neighborhoods. And the reason I say specific neighborhoods is because we have to start somewhere. And if we spread the dollars too thin, it will never show progress. So if we group houses or areas together and start moving forward place by place, including the parks and blight remediation, we can show progress throughout the city. We are still building this, and I really look forward to hearing everybody's recommendations and ideas for the use of these funds for these reasons. We can provide you additional information if you need on how the dollars can be used for these purposes, but our goal right now is to look at housing, parks, and blight remediation.
So the process for submitting the city's programming to the county is a little different than it would be in a traditional setting where we were managing our own CDBG award. So we're at the point just before the proposal. I'm going to gather community feedback from residents. We have this town hall, we have another one on Monday, and then we will have a paper survey out in the hallway, and we also will send out a digital survey, and we hope that everyone returns their surveys so we can collect some data on public opinion. We will then draft the proposal while including the residents' feedback, and then we will schedule a public hearing. The public hearing is a formal hearing. It will take place before council and be held in these chambers. The proposal will be approved, or really the application will be approved formally by council resolution, meaning it will come before council 2 times. And the application will be submitted by December 23rd, hopefully sooner than then. And the county will go ahead and implement the financial controls for those programs. I think it's important to note that while we're programming CDBG for 2023 dollars do not become available until January 1st of the following year. So, for example, we programmed, or the former city council programmed CDBG resources for sidewalk improvements for 2022. The Department of Grants and Philanthropy will not have access to those resources until January 1st of 2023. And I know that is not how things are typically handled, but the program years do run 1 year behind. And that is across the board for sub-grantees of county HUD resources. So you might notice that projects that are designated as program year 2022 haven't necessarily started yet, and that explains why. We don't have access to those resources until the start of the new year. So now I'm going to open it up to questions. There's a podium up over there, and the microphone is on. I ask that you do speak into the microphone so that folks at home who are online or watching on the cable channel can also hear you and participate in the meeting. So you're welcome to provide us with any questions you might have, and we'll do our best to answer them. Following the Q&A, we have some tables set up outside with the various issue spaces that we thought were good themes for discussion. All of the staff members will be in the hallway. You're welcome to engage with us and ask us questions. There are surveys out there, my usual bin of sticky notes that you can write your thoughts and comments and put them up on the walls, and we'll be here to make sure that we can either answer your questions, and if we don't have the answer now, get back to you and get your contact information to provide you with a response. Are you referring to on the commission as an Oakland County Commissioner? I'm not certain, but I will find out and follow up with you.
I just got a question about the Michigan Land Bank. Are they involved in any of the remediation?
Yeah, I don't think that's on.
That better? Just a question about the Michigan Land Bank. Are they involved in any of the remediation of properties, condemned structures and whatnot?
I will have to look into that, not to the best of my knowledge, but I can find out and get back to you.
Okay, thank you.
And I just want to make one more note. Our building and safety manager was supposed to be here tonight. Unfortunately, he is sick, and so I know a lot of these questions would have typically been directed to him. We'll provide him, his name is Mike Wilson, we'll provide him with the list of these questions and make sure that he gets back to you if it is kind of building and safety related.
Hi. Are these funds coming from Oakland County, what we used to have before it went to the county? And if so, how much is that coming back to Pontiac for the CBG monies?
So I want to make sure I answer your question right. So the resources are from the Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is a federal department. They administer Community Development Block Grant. Typically, it goes directly to municipalities.
Right.
Because of the mismanagement in the past, the county holds our resources for us. And last year we programmed $810,000. And while we don't know the exact amount that will be programmed for 2023, we are advised to program the exact same amount. So right around 800,000.
Yeah, the reason I was asking is I know before the mayor was saying that we were getting our monies back from the county. So I was just wondering how much of the monies in which we gave during the emergency manager are we receiving back from the
I
county?
see. So we won't be receiving a lump sum check from the county because they did perform the service, or they do perform the service of managing those resources. So what happens is that they hold the resources and they pay for the programming that we instruct by this application for them to pay for. What will happen instead, once we have official confirmation from HUD to be able to administer those resources in-house, is that the resources will come directly to us and we will program them internally. And so the number that I just mentioned, the 800,000, it will increase significantly because that administrative fee that's being taken by the county to do complicated and hard work that they earn very well will no longer go to them and will come here. So I can't give you an exact amount of what that will look like, but it will be an increased amount. Each year, the appropriation or the allocation to each municipality is different. It's based on number of residents, demographics, qualified census tract, the list goes on. So I don't want to be misleading and give the wrong number, but I can tell you that the number will increase significantly.
And I guess I'm interested in, because I know Pontiac, I don't know, can I do one more question?
Yeah, go for it.
I know the city of Pontiac is, as a homeowner, we need these funds to help with roofing and other repairs. I'm just wondering, is the program going to be somewhat of the same like it was in the past, where it's like a soft lien for 5 years and then it falls off? Or you guys are and how much are we having? Is it like 20,000 or something like that for, like roofing and, whatever? I know your guys are working on it, but I'm just wondering, is that going to be one of the premises? Or are you going to do it like the county does and just, there's a lien on the house until you sell it?
That's a great question. So the HOME program, and that's an acronym, HOME, is slightly separate of Block Grant. And so we do intend to bring the HOME program back in-house as well. We've heard the residents' concerns loud and clear. The lien program with the county doesn't serve residents in the way that they'd like. And so we do intend to bring that program back here as well. The specifics of how the city would administer it, I, again, don't want to speak out of turn. But we have heard that's very feedback, and we agree that the program itself as it stands doesn't serve as many residents as the resources should.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Hello. Nice
Hello.
presentation. Thank you for doing this. So we don't get an accounting from the county on, like, how much the county received allocated to Pontiac and then how much they ultimately spend in Pontiac? So we don't know the difference between that to determine what the fee is that they retain?
For block grant?
Yeah.
No, we do.
But you mentioned that you didn't know what the fee was. I'm just wondering, so for like the 2022 funds that were spent, how much did the county keep for its fee?
So the county takes 20% of the total award. Now, once we bring the block grant back in-house, the calculation will change for how much we actually receive. So we're a sub-grant of Oakland County. The rest of Oakland County is a lot different than the city of Pontiac. And so we're receiving an allocation based on the demographics of the county as a whole. So we suspect, and the advice we've been given, is that that number will change, how it is appropriated will change, and it will increase.
Okay, so but right now, though, the fee that the county's keeping is about $200,000.
Correct. For example, in 2019, the county kept $299,720.
And then I think the emergency manager, I think this was taken away from the city about 10 years ago, if I recall?
Correct.
2012, something like that?
Correct.
So this process has been happening, the same process has been happening for the past 10 years.
Correct.
So do we have a history of what the city has requested that, where it wanted to spend its block grants and where the county denied that?
To my knowledge, they haven't denied any of our programming.
Okay.
I'm working with historical records that sometimes were well kept and sometimes weren't, but to my knowledge, the relationship has been really great. They're very helpful. They program the way that we ask for the resources to be programmed, as long as we adhere to their process and procedure. So I have not heard of them saying no to any of our program requests.
That's great. And then lastly, is this part of an overall comprehensive housing plan that the city has in place, or is this a piece of it that could be part of a comprehensive plan?
The city doesn't currently have an overall comprehensive housing plan. As the community development director, that is something that I can instruct my department to work on, and that is something that we will complete for the city.
Is it underway, or is it just we think we'd like to do it?
I don't currently have the staff in place to begin a plan like that. I am hiring a planning manager, a economic development manager, an economic development specialist, and there will be 2 planning positions opening up as well.
So in lieu of not having sort of a comprehensive housing plan, and these town halls are great, are you also going out to other community organizations and seeking their input on maybe, there's a lot of community organizations that are involved in housing in the city, doing their thing, but is there a plan to sort of, in the meantime, go out and also solicit feedback from them on sort of where you can leverage these dollars with those community organizations? Because if you, for instance, if a community organization is working on $1 million project, and it would be made even more incredible if they could spend $1.2 million, and that block grant sort of filled that gap. I'm just wondering, is there maybe a plan to do that?
I don't anticipate us being short-staffed for all that much longer.
Okay.
So as we are building the comprehensive housing plan with the new staff, we will certainly reach out to those groups.
That's awesome. Thank you so much. I appreciate it. And it's a great presentation.
I'm sorry, I just got one more question. How do we keep the corruption that caused the problems in the first place, or the mismanagement, how are we keeping that from happening again?
That is a great question. So what we did is a feasibility study, like I mentioned. I was hired just over 1.5 years ago with a background in grantsmanship and grant management. I conducted a feasibility study through a grant from the Community Foundation for Southeast Michigan for $100,000. I engaged with 2 consulting firms, one Baker Tilly, and the second is a team of consultants from MIT, to establish the department, to build out standard operating procedures, workflows, job descriptions, salary analysis, to understand how grants impact other departments here at City Hall and how they would interact with residents as both the grantee and the grantor. We built out The staffing requirements went through the recruiting process and staffed up, but also engaged with community stakeholders, like you mentioned, from the nonprofit and foundation space. We set up a fiscal sponsorship agreement with Pontiac Community Foundation to make sure we're managing charitable contributions within compliance of those awards, and set checks and balances for true compliance here at City Hall in partnership with a legal team. So I feel confident that we have built the machine to manage these resources. Compliance is the name of our game. The lack of staffing in prior years and some of the other growing pains, for better or worse, that the city was happening at that time, I can't speak to. But what I can say is that this department will implement best practice on all awards, whether they're federal, local, or foundation dollars.
So you feel comfortable that all the paperwork that they require gets filled at the right times, and there's not going to be any of those issues where they take the grant away and say, here you go, Oakland County, it's all yours?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. I'm Rick David. I'm chair of the Historic Commission. And you may know that there are 5 historic districts in the city. So when you look at new housing, think about traditional housing in these wonderful areas that some of it needs so much help. And we've never been really proactive in developing it. We only react when people come and they want to remodel or something. We could do so much more if we could do proactive stuff. That's number one. Number two, where the state hospital was on Elizabeth Lake Road, that housing development, to my knowledge, was never completed. As I haven't driven by it lately, but street lights and all those kinds of stuff were not put in there, and it was not a completed area. And so when you think about housing, think about finishing housing that we once started in Pontiac, but we are running in place. And the third is we have 25 or 26 parks in the city. Do we really need, for our per capita, 25 or 26 parks? It's nice. I mean, I put things in the category of nice or necessary. And it's nice to have those, but I don't know how many people, traditionally you have to watch out for those 26 parks, 2 or 3. It's really mission impossible. And when you look at housing, some of those can be converted to housing, perhaps. So that's a third thing that I would ask you to do. But think about the historic areas. Seminole Hills is an important area where Mr. Taubman was raised, for example. The downtown area, Fairgrove, and the GM Modern Historic District are several of those to consider. Thanks so much.
Thank you. Does anyone hope to share any ideas or requests or desires for the use of CDBG? I'm sure that CDBG keeps everyone up at night, but if you have any comments about how you'd like to see these resources be invested, I'd love to hear them.
I just have a suggestion. As far as anyone to get the most out of the dollars, how about using it in a dollar match program so that that $800,000 becomes $1.6 million of investment, especially like downtown where people are struggling and we have 30 whatever vacant storefronts. That's just my suggestion. Try and get more impact out of it. Thank you.
Thanks.
I had a suggestion. I was thinking about, I don't know if it has been done before, it probably has been done before, we can try to encourage new home ownership by using some of these houses that have been deemed, I guess, on the demolish, whatever. I guess I had it together before I came up here, but where, the houses that are sitting around, that are vacant, and use that incentive, like, to encourage new ownership. Like, say I'm going to give you a grant of $20,000 to fix it up in order to, to ensure property owners. You know what I'm saying? Something to that degree.
Great.
I'm thinking that it could be used for that, or am I not right that the CBG monies could be considered for that? To encourage home ownership.
Certainly, and there are lots of different ways to do that.
Yes, yes, that is something that we are looking into.
Yeah, because I know the homes that, my understanding, the homes that they're building now are, and we've seen a lot of problems with those new homes. And the homes that they demolished in the past that could have been rehabbed, somebody could have, they could have used the CBG monies and moved into those homes instead of tearing them down. So I'm just hoping that instead of just, building these new houses and making sure that they're up to par, because some of them I think either was a foundation or something to that degree that people were complaining about. So I'm just wanting to, make sure that we are building quality houses and doing the necessary inspections as well. So,
Yes,
That's
that all falls under the revitalization
okay.
aspect of the plan.
This lady brought up a great point. How about dollar matching for down payment for homeownership programs, specifically for people that may already be renting in the community, as opposed to trying to give money to people from outside the area? How about the people here maybe get a hand up to dollar match their down payment, and someone with like a, what do they call it, a FHA loan with 3% down, they could buy a $100,000 house, which I think we could still find here in Pontiac, for $1,500 down. Think about how many people that could impact. Just, she brought it up, it just hit me, so that's great that we do these things.
Great. Anybody else?
All right, I hope this is my last time. How about schools? Does any of this help or go to the schools at all? Because we have an issue with schools in this city.
So block grant resources are for the city to program, and the city's municipal government is technically separate from the school district. I don't know that historically we have partnered on any block grant resources. What I can tell you is that the city in prior years before my time did program some of these funds for youth services and youth programming, and those programs were very successful. So again, I wasn't here, they were long ago, but they did perhaps complement the traditional educational system and provide wraparound services for students. So perhaps that's something to explore.
Yeah, I mean, like, does any of it go into, say, buildings that might be deteriorating and could use a rehab?
Specifically in the school district?
Yeah.
No, so it has to be for city-owned and operated resources or capital. So if the city owned the property and the city owned the building or structure, then certainly. But if it's owned by the school district, that's a different conversation and one that the mayor would certainly have to have.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else have anything to add or any questions? No? Okay, so it's 6:45. We will be in the hallway available to answer questions. There are surveys out there that I encourage you to complete, and you can put them in this tray up here on the table. We'll collect the surveys in paper form, or you can wait for us to email to you, and you can do it online. And you're welcome to write your notes on the sticky notes that are out there and put them up in the appropriate places, or just engage with staff. I really appreciate your feedback. This will help us get a sense of what the community would like to see these resources execute, and we hope to provide you with a really well-rounded proposal, and we hope to see you at our public hearing. Thanks so much for coming.